Welcome back to the Football Fitness Federation podcast. This is episode 278. I'm excited for this one today. I'm joined on the podcast by Sally Needham. Sally, how are you doing?
I'm good, thank you, Ben. Thanks for the invite.
No problem at all. We were just saying we had to delay it a week because we'd have both sounded like a bit of a doctor's surgery going on with a bit of illness going around. So I appreciate your flexibility and coming on the podcast. So thanks for freeing some time up.
No problem at all. You're welcome.
Sally, just take us, because you've got quite a individual role, I suppose, at the club. That isn't going to be. It's not going to be at many other clubs, so we'll get into that in a little bit. But do you want to just start us off on your background?
Yeah, so I started off in coaching. So did my badges quite quick, to be honest. Got my UFB at 20, which were quite unique, really, then as a female. And then went into coach ed. Doing that, I'm working in mum and dad's factory in the morning in the admin, and then doing all PPA and coaching and everything like that, trying to get myself a job role after university. And then I got a phone call from Ted Dale, who was at David Beckham Academy. So I went down into London, and that was my first like full-time job role. So I went into Beckham Academy for about 2.5 years. Met some amazing people that are still I'm close to now. But also then what happened is 2007, the FA launched the FA Skills Programme, and a couple of the people at the Beckham Academy went to be regional managers. So I applied for one of the roles, got one. There were 66 of us. So I started the FA in 2007, and it was on a programme, like I say, working with 5 to 11, so we're coaching. Really fortunate that I got asked to go on the pilot of the Advanced Youth Award in 2012, which were a game changer for me and kind of massive kind of diverted me into this area. So I went on that in 2012, did my AYA, and then still working at the FA. Then 2015, the FA pulled up some county coach developer roles, so I applied for one of those and moved across. So I went then into more coach development. Decided I'd do my A licence, so applied and did that. But obviously I had to be working at 11v11, so I went and worked at Sheffield Girls Centre of Excellence and did that, and finished then my A lessons off at Donny Bells. And while we're at the Girls Centre of Excellence, had a player that really struggled to connect with, that caused me a lot of issues, but she's a great girl. And to be fair, it was my lens on her behaviour that was the issue, not her actually. When now I know that. So I went and did a child development, neuroscience, brain development course away from the FA. My best friend had trained in it and were applying it in a practitioner role, and just said to me that, you're looking at these players' behaviours all wrong. So, which I was. So I went and did that, and then the last couple of years been trying to transfer it back into the FA, and delivering it in clubs, and getting to a point where the work, neuroscience, was embedded in my daily practices. And then COVID hit, so I took redundancy from the FA. Luckily for me, Jack Lester at Sheffield had been after me for a while, so I finished at the FA on a Friday, started at Sheffield United on the Monday as a performance consultant, so I was doing 2 days a week. And then gradually, as Jack went to first team with Paul Eckingbottom, Eki approached and said, would you consider coming full time? So I went full time in October 2022. March 2022. So I've been there ever since, and yeah, so I'm at Sheffield now. Do little bits for, I've just signed a contract. I was working at Wales Women, and Gemma, the head coach, just gone to Norway Women, so I'm moving across with her to Norway. And then I do a bit of business with a really good friend of mine, with some individual players. So that's where the work's at the minute.
Amazing. I wanted to get you on because obviously you've referenced there some of your early experiences with players and like your reflections on that as well. So I think this is where we can, as listeners, we can take a lot from the lessons that you've learned in your coaching, but also everything that you've gone on to study since in terms of neuroscience. So I wanted to start us quite broad in terms of how does neuroscience impact the work that we do with players?
So for me, neuroscience is the soil in what we see. So understanding the individual, we talk about it all the time, from whatever lens that is about understanding who you're working with. But neuroscience helps us to understand actually what is in their brain and their body. So it's the soil stuff that underpins everything. When we then talk it from like a coaching lens, elements of what we see above the surface on, say, behavior, like I said about what player, neuroscience gives us the underpinning knowledge and understanding of why that's occurring. So how and what these behaviors are being brought out. We then look at then how our body and nervous system work together. How does that then inform the way that we are with players or with our clients? How we structure our learning, how do we understand them? How do we recognize when they're in and out of their states, their emotional regulation, and also just being more purposeful with our practices. So like you say to me all the time, realistically, what neurosciences gave us is nothing new in the sense of nothing that we don't already know or don't get preached around in our coaching awards or in our daily practices. But what it does give us is the understanding of the why we do what we do. So that the fact that then it makes it so we can be more purposeful in what we do to enable us to get more development underneath in that soil. We talk about the soil being like our emotional resilience, and that's our body and our brain. So if we can be more purposeful in it, we've got more understanding of the soil, but also then how we deposit into that soil for that player, which then relates back to, if you look at it from a grass perspective, what you see on the surface then is basically underpinned by the soil. But also then as a practitioner, you then can try and push and prod and develop them players or people. That's then what you see above the surface.
Yeah, I love that analogy. That makes complete sense. And if you could use as many of those as possible for my little brain, that'd be great, Sally. No, I think it's really it's something we speak about a lot in terms of dealing with individual players. And we speak obviously on the strength side, the power side, but this side of things in terms of the coaching and dealing with each individual and each individual's characteristics is so important, isn't it? Because I suppose some of the things that you brought up where a player might be harder to work with initially.
Yeah.
Previously, it was a bit disregarded, wasn't it? Like, oh, they're not going to do what we said, so let's just sort of push them to one side and focus on the people that do. And I suppose, is that the biggest impact now, that you feel like you can hit the broad spectrum of players because everyone's different, we accept that, and now it's finding a way of working with them?
Well, definitely. And I think understanding that every behaviour that a person has is a result of probably an experience or something that's happened through childhood. So we know that importance of childhood, like in key and then as behaviours. And so, for example, like we've got a player that struggles to do much more than he's asked to do in the gym. Like it's a nightmare getting him in the gym. Like he don't see the value in it. He don't go over his reps or things like that. So, but what my analogy to the staff is, if that's not being put in his system, or he's missed elements of that in his system from childhood and then experiences then when he's been at school, it's like a puppy, you train him. So we can't just say to him he's got to do it once, I know, like, and then we expect it to be layered in his nervous system, in his brain. It's not. You've got to neurologically layer it. So for him to behave differently, he's got to think differently, which sparks two neurons. The more then that pathway gets embedded, that becomes then his new way of being. So we can't just expect that some children, we can't just go, oh, they haven't got this or they don't do that as players. It's a case of, right, well, what is it that's missing? What do we then need to then help him with? Then how do we neurologically embed it into him? And then he's got the skill set then to do it. So it's not the child's fault. It's something that's probably not being put in through childhood. And it doesn't mean the fact that he's had a traumatic experience. He comes from an amazing, loving family, but it's just being missed in some of his development. We've all got them. We've all got those little missing interruptions. So I think for me now, when I first came in Sheffield, my lens is giving a different perspective. So when we say, oh, he don't look bothered, well, does he not look bothered, or is he out of his learning capacity, which means he's not up for social engagement, or is he still going through adolescent brain changes that we know that is literally your facial goes offline because of your prefrontal cortex. So elements of all that is where I think that neuroscience gives us the fact that we always look at behavior and there's always a reason behind it, and it'll probably come through childhood. And then you start to then shine a light on that behavior, or how do you then bridge that gap of putting that back in their system? So a lot's done that way. And you mentioned like power and like endurance and all that stuff. For me, my lens and understanding neuroscience, everything is built upon your bodily state. So if you don't feel like you are safe in connection, or you're not regulated in your bodily state, whatever you're then going to do in the gym or on the field or learning is limited in a sense, then how you can do it or what it then gets stored and then the benefit of that. So for me, it's pivotal before you start even looking at anything else that you understand around this area and understand how you notice it in players, but also then being able to build that into practice, because like I said, decision making, self-confidence, power, endurance, movement, anything technical is all built on your bodily state.
And what age are we talking about here, Sally, in terms of your work? Does that stem right across the academy age groups?
Yeah, so from pre-academy all the way through. There's different lenses. The neuroscience underpins it all. Even our education team and things like that is all underpinned by the neuroscience. What will be slightly different in different phases is the fact of when you are in your younger phase, you need a lot of more co-regulation. So the impact of the coach is very much more higher in the co-regulation phase. When children then start to develop their own self-regulation, it's then the fact of understanding the role that you play in helping them self-regulate as well, along with their brain changes. And then as we go into PDP more, which is like 18s and above, some of them will still be going through brain changes. We also know that our brain and our body doesn't settle down till mid-20s. So then what you're trying to do is give them the daily habits earlier and understanding themselves early. And that was the remit. I just want the boys to know themselves earlier before they get to then late 20s, then start to actually know themselves. So we're trying to give them the fact that we build these foundations, we understand how they then go through brain changes, but then as they come into the PDP, we give them more ownership and responsibility around understanding themselves.
One thing, obviously, that's a challenge in academy football is the fact that you're going to have some players that start in early age groups and they'll work their way right through and hopefully end up in first team.
Yeah.
But the real situation is that a lot of players will come in at different ages.
Yeah.
So how do you deal with that? So, for example, if you've got like a 14-year-old player that might have been at another academy, might not, might have just been playing locally, they then come into the system. You've got these other players around them where you've created this program for them. Hopefully they've been through a few years of work with you, but this player hasn't.
Yeah.
So what's the approach to that?
We have to upskill quite quick. So especially, we don't have much change in the younger age bands, if I'm honest. And when they do have the changes, the role of the coach is really important in that, bringing them in and upskilling them. The younger age bandings have like weekly workshops with me, but basically the more interaction is the coach. So my work, majority in the younger phases, is done with the coaches. So then they can understand how transition, how creating safety, all that stuff will occur in them younger age bandings if they're coming in. The older bands is like they say, our under 18s. We had basically that this year. So we had 7 boys from London that came up. So we have to then start to understand that they then have to be upskilled because what they've done in other programs in other academies will probably not be won't be neuroscience. We know that because we're only doing it. So we have to upskill them quite quickly, but we have to really understand about the transition periods. So we got them in quite a lot when they were finishing, coming up for games, being around them, coming up for a couple of days and staying over. The coach has basically been able to have time with them. We went and did like a 3-day in the Lake District. So we underpinned like how the groupings get together. We did like some stuff on like, tell me about you. What do I need to know about you? How do I help you in these sessions? What do you want? What's my background? So we got them to present and we did loads of stuff around understanding them and understanding each other and working together. So you're right, in the younger phases when children come in, the role of the coach is really important. How we structure the environment and transition periods of the players that are coming in is really key for us. And I think you've got to be skillful in understanding that safety and that how they transition in will be key to whether they, and I used to get it all the time, oh, it takes them to Christmas to settle in. All right. Okay. Is that every year that's been the case? Yeah. Always takes them to Christmas to settle in. I'm like, all right, so we've missed 4 months of development. So how do we get to it where we don't get that? So like we did like a video of the academy and pitch, and then we know that threat comes from our eyes and our mouth. So a lot of like safety will come from seeing things already. So we film the academy. This is where you go on your first day. This is all you'll see. This is your coach. So we did like a little bit of video. All you're trying to do is create, we've got what's called a window of tolerance, and any new experiences, our window of tolerance shuts to help us to keep us safe. The more that we can stretch that window of tolerance, so when they come in, they feel safe, we've got up for connection quicker, their learning's higher, behaviour goes down, and we get into this development a lot quicker. So there's different ways in which we've tried to do it, but we understand that that is how it's going to be, but we need to be able to be better at developing that quicker.
Yeah, no, I love that. Love that. Across the ages, is there a certain age that I was gonna use challenging, but I mean challenging in a way from like your perspective, but also I suppose an age that you would highlight for coaches to be most prepared for this kind of work, where the players need the most support, or does it just completely depend on the individual?
I can't say one or the other with that, because you can look at the little ones pre-academy and you go, who's got a really good stress response system, which you can look at when we do breath work with them, who can down regulate for 5 minutes after a session. That's a massive indicator for us that they're going to have enough in the system, they've got enough in the system to be able to learn. Otherwise, you're always trying to put that deposit in that soil, which then their learnings become less than what the ones have that's got a really good stress response system. I'm going off piece really, but coming back to your question in the sense of the age groupings, I'm really passionate the fact of, I don't think we get the youth development phase right for our players. We perceive them to be a challenging age because of teenagers. But when you look at the research and what it tells about the adolescent brain, then you look at our education system, or sometimes the system that they're in the academy, we're not understanding and working with that of where they're going through it. So I think that's massively key, is the staffing around that area, how we've changed some of our age bandings to basically highlight and put some more focus on this. And then you've got the under 18s and 21s where fear just sets into them because of scholarships, low moves, seeing other people do well, all that side of it, and pressure from parents, which we know. So going back to your question, there's no real importance age. The understanding of what's happening in the individual in front of you is key. But I also think that we're not working with the players with what the science tells us in the youth development phase.
Yeah, 100%. I wanted to ask as well, you mentioned there about the older players, sort of 18s, having a lot of players coming up from London, and this is the modern day sort of game now, isn't it, where players are getting signed from different countries, different parts of the country. There's a lot of different challenges that are going on at different times. So if you're thinking now about the modern day player, and not just the modern day player, but the modern day person, how different is it now from your perspective, pre-phones, like pre-technology, all this stuff that is now available to players? How different should or do we work with players now?
Yeah, so the big thing for me with some of our players that have come through is you've got to look culturally what's happened. So when I were born, we'd walk to school. My grandma brought me up because my mum and dad had just started a business. I had that real key attachment from childhood. A lot now within women, within females that are in a high profile job, they starting work, having a family later, which means we go back to work quicker. And it's culturally, which is not a negative, but because of that now the attachment sometimes isn't as programmed in, whereas before you had a parent that probably stayed at home. So our children that's coming through now, some of them haven't as much have got an understanding of or a developed stress response system. So that's a major thing. We're going to also have the benefit, well, the impact of COVID, especially with our younger players coming through with anxiety, one through epigenetics, through mothers, in how they was isolated through birth. And then also because we know that our threat detection system is our eyes and our mouth. So when babies were born and they read them cues and triggers all the time from this in this area, they haven't had that development of that because their masks were high. So they've only seen eyes. So they'll have had an underdeveloped stress of threat. So their anxiety will be higher. We've got then children that didn't finish their schooling in the sense of like a prom night or whatever before they move from senior school to primary school to senior school. So that element of closure before they moved, they've had a transition period where there wasn't closure. So anxiety will be higher again. And then you come back to obviously phones, interactions. The biggest thing that I try, I'm not perfect with it, but I try when I have my nieces or nephews, especially my littlest niece, I always try and put my phone away.
Yeah.
Because I know the fact of all she wants and all she needs from me is me to be present. If I can be present, I'm depositing emotional resilience into her soil. And she was born premature, which don't get me started on that. We don't even touch that in the academies about premature and trauma. But she was born premature, so she shouldn't even be in that age, in that school year. So I know the fact that when you're present, I can deposit soil into emotional resilience, and she needs it most. So it's the children that are coming through. At Sheffield, we work on a behavioural framework. We don't work on a psychology framework. And our behaviours are ownership, communication, and steel. We're forging steel, so that's what we use instead of the term resilience because it gets branded too much for me. And that's what the research shows us, that our 16s that are coming out of school have not got enough ownership or communication or emotional resilience. So how do we give that then? Because in primary school, they get taught how to learn. In secondary school, they get taught what to learn to pass an exam. And then we've got all the old concept of boys. How socioculturally, from a sociological lens, do we govern boys to govern girls? It's different. And the messages are different in what gets played out to girls to boys. So the modern day child that is coming through is different. And how we governed them probably before and what we said to them, and also how we have certain practices in football that just repeat. We're probably trying to test that and challenge that in quite a few bits. And a lot of the youngsters these days want to know the why. They want to know why you're doing it. So that element of, and that's come out. I'm just at a minute, hopefully finishing, near to finish my professional doctorate. And that was the big thing that the boys said in the data. They like to know the why. So instead of just giving them a tool that like, all right, you can do some breath work, I have to give them, right, this is the science, this is the tool, this is the support. They want to know the why. So yeah, so we're different in what we're coming through. So Simon Sinek's research on ownership and communication and things of what the generation Z's now missing is why we went after what we did in our outfight behaviours.
I think that some of the things you brought up there are just things that people don't talk about or probably aren't even aware about half the time, have they, when we're working with players. So this is exactly why I wanted to do this today, because hopefully it opens people's eyes in terms of the players that we've got in front of us. When you've got a group of whatever age it is, there's a lot of, it's a complex situation, I suppose, isn't it, when you've got these players in front of you. So no, I think it's really, really important. Just off the back of that though, we've talked there about some of the challenges that we face in terms of modern day players with things like technology and
Yeah,
with
yeah.
social media, and you talked about higher levels of anxiety. Well, if we had that high levels of anxiety to getting contracts at clubs and all that sort of stuff, it's all going into the same sort of boat, isn't it?
Yeah.
But what is there in terms of our approach where we can use it as a positive? Are there certain things where you go, right, the modern day player now, you've said there a little bit about them asking why, them wanting to know why.
Yeah.
Is there anything else where we can be like, right, we can use the approach that they have now and the way that they work now in this positive way to get the most out of it?
Yeah, I think that comes back to as well, going back to the YDP phase, but I jump back to the PDP. But the YDP, I think that's where we see teenagers as these rebels and whatever, but actually they've got really good high risk, like risk taking. We can see it's negative, or actually we can see it really positive on how we give them healthy risk, and also our practice design and how we use that for our benefit rather than going against it, and how they are in peers groups is massive in that YDP. So we sometimes look at it from a negative lens, but actually if we look at what we could actually use in where they are, the YDP is a really good point. In the older end, really clear we are, well, try to be really clear with our boys that emotions and feelings are that. There's no good or bad, it's an array. So to experience anxiety, and you've got to experience love and all that. So I want the boys to understand that feelings and emotions are normal. How then they understand and work with that is what's going to be the key. And it's always your body that's trying to keep you safe. So we're wanting them to really understand that it's not a negative, it's actually who they are. And if they understand themselves and can work with it, they can use it as performance gain. If they don't understand it and don't work with it, it's going to work against them, which is sad in a one way, the fact that when I look at certain players, you sometimes realise that if they've had probably some knowledge of this, where they went to or what level they achieved to what they wanted to achieve is probably being limited. But actually understanding this and working with it. And a lot of people always said to me around, have you faced any challenges with it, with this work? And going off piece, but it's coming back to your question, is the fact of whenever I deliver this work, a lot of people said to me, oh my God, that were like me when I played, or that's me. So they're starting to realise that it is normal. Your body and brain is normal. So we've got a coach with us, and he's like, Sally, like, I used to get dry mouth. Like, they sent me for a diabetes test. I was fittest in training, coming to a game, I couldn't run my legs. He's like, that's me, isn't it? I'm like, yeah. He's like, oh my God. He's like, why didn't somebody help me with this when I was playing? I'm like, well, we didn't know it then, because neuroscience, it's a really big word to make me look a lot smarter than I am, but it's understanding body and brain. But we've only really got to know the advances in it in the last 12, 13, 14 years because the advances in technology. So this is nothing new, but it's just basically being able to confirm a lot that we thought, especially in modern day practices of the contemplative tools like breath work and meditation, stuff like that. But you're right. So in a sense, this complexity of anxiety or anything like that, I'll challenge the boys on the fact that it's perceived sometimes as, oh, it's a negative, but actually it's who you are, and it's your bodily system that's working how it's going to work, and it's all to do with your threat. And if you can understand it and work with it, it's a performance gain because of the chemicals that it produces. If you don't, it's going to work against you. And then you've got two choices with that. And really being able to feel it, sense in, and be self-aware and work with it is probably where we've had the biggest gains.
Absolutely love that. Love it. I think as a parent as well, so much resonates around, like, my kids are only young, but you can see already some of the sort of patterns of their behavior, and some of the things that you naturally lean to thinking that you're right. And then when you question it, you're like, actually, that's just their characteristics. But we did an episode quite a while ago now when we titled it Managing the Maverick. And it was all about like the Maverick player, like your Gazzers, and we referred to different sports like Dennis Rodman and these players that were basically geniuses, but they didn't fall in line with all the other players. But that was their superpower, really. And that, as you were saying it then, I was like, that's exactly what it ties into, doesn't it? Like, you've got these players that would be super, super talented, are we just going to pull them back in line and try and get them to behave like everyone else? Or are we going to actually help them develop?
Yeah, I think it's key, like understanding the individual and understanding who they are. Like, I'm a big thing, like we've had this conversation last few weeks. So when I first came in, I used to go into Jack's office and he used to say to me, "Oh God, what now?" Because I used to be like, "Right, why do we do that?" And he'd be like, "I don't know, we just do it." And I'm like, "Right, well, that needs changing."
Yeah.
And coming back to like your Mavericks, like we stopped, like our boys, a lot of academies make them have black boots. And I said to him, I said, "But you've asked them to conform, but then you're asking them to be creative."
Yeah.
So it's like, and then with one of our boys has got like really big hair, and he's like, and I'm like, "I love your hair, Bobby. Like, I love your hair." He's like, "I know." He's like, "I'm not sure. I don't know if I need to like change it to like, I'm not really sure about it. We keep getting comments." I'm like, "Makes you stand out. It's who you are. Like, we've got to embrace them." And people will push boundaries, and boys do, but they need it. But we've got to be really careful not to ask them to be creative, but then ask them to conform.
Yeah.
And you've got to think outside the box sometimes. So we got a boy that struggled with emotional control because of history. But he don't really like doing anything apart from rap music. So I did all the meditative practices with rap music, and it worked for him. But you've got to just think that I hated in fact, I got into Rod Wave a little bit once we started with some songs. I had to pick through some songs. But you do have to go with what they want. Otherwise, we get programmed into trying to make them into what we think and putting our lens onto them and how we've always done it onto them, when actually they will dictate what relationship they have with you. Our academy manager talks about it all the time. And then it's how you understand them, to them what relationship you give them and how you are with them. But yeah, the Mavericks are different, especially when you start looking at their reward system in their brains. We've got two different reward systems, dopamine and serotonin, and how then you bring that to play. And so yeah, it's interesting.
Yeah, no, it definitely is. No, I find that fascinating. Just especially within a group of players, because you're going to have such different personalities and characteristics of each individual. So no, and that's why it applies to everyone listening. So everyone listening is going to have a group of players in front of them, and already they're probably thinking about, oh yeah, that player who wears those coloured boots or has that hairstyle or acts in this certain way. Like you'll be able to picture those people as well. You've talked a few times, Sally, about breath work, about meditation. It's
Yeah.
definitely something I want to dive into because I see it being done more and more at clubs, which obviously is great to see. But I want to just go into how you actually run it with players. You gave it a really good example there of like an individual and
Yeah.
making it personalized to them so they actually buy into it. So what's been your experiences around that and maybe some of the positives that have come off the back of it as well?
Yeah, so we implemented yoga into the program. So we normally do gym and yoga split. So half will go in the gym, half will go yoga, and then there's changeover. We had a yoga teacher come in to start with, and did some videos and kind of like developed it the right way. And then I now deliver it. I've done yoga for years, but I deliver it now with the boys. But we set off in the program with a yoga teacher just to get it nailed in first, so they got some good techniques in. And then what we do is we'll tag that on to some breath work. The boys love the breath work, like love it. And then what happens is we've got a mindfulness room. So the boys will come in and do morning work, whether that's a technical work, whether that's a gym session, whatever it is, all work with me. And certain groups, we might do it as a group of 3, we might do it as an individual, and they'll come in and do some breath work. We know that our breath is really our remote control of our body. And if we can understand how that works and what strategies we work with it, then it will aid our thinking and our nervous system regulation. So we do a lot of breath work. It's embedded, like I said, into the program. They have to do it every week. It's no non-negotiables and everybody does it. But then certain individuals will do more of the program with me, whether that is breath work, whether that is some meditation, whether that is visualization. All the boys get a journal. Some use them, some don't. That's personal choice. We have cold water baths. So we've got like the pods that come in and do some cold water breath work within it. I'm taking one of the boys out on Friday. We're going up to a place in Sheffield. I'm going to do a morning of breath work in nature. So I'm taking him out on Friday. So yeah, so it's implemented as part of the program, but then it's implemented in the sense of individual work as well. We know the science behind it all. So I always present the science to the boys and probably examples of who does it, why you do it, what does it gain, what does it link into performance. And then I'm always there, like trying to push them into, so like a player in our 18s, he does a lot of breath work for his free kicks. We've put it into the program around penalty takers and how we use neuroscience to influence in his penalties. Some of our players use it, our goalkeepers use it before they strike the ball. So yeah, so it's common practice, it's common knowledge. You see a lot of the boys using it. Language is key as well for us in what we do. But yeah, so, and same as meditation. So I'll set the boys. So when we meditate, if I was to put a swimming cap on that lit up certain areas, these 3 areas would light up more, which is your prefrontal cortex, your ACC, and your insula. They're all linked to motor skills or emotional control, focus, concentration, decision making. Are they not key for football? Yeah, all right then. So this is what we're working on. So like you would do, you go in the S&C and do your gym, or you go on the technical. This is what we're putting into daily habits. And certain players have certain elements that they've took. Some have got maybe 1 or 2 things that they do. Some have got 6 or 7 things that they do. It's interesting that the data from the staff has been around. The ones that have bought into it a hell of a lot more we're seeing them now coming through either first team or on loan somewhere, or getting the chances. And that's what kind of happened to start with. I started with a player that then bought into it, that had good social capital in the group, and then players started, oh well, that's working for so you can see the benefit, and then it just escalated and snowrolled. So the boys love it. I think it helps that I can tie it into the football as well. It helps that the coaches do it. So like our academy manager comes in, he does morning, he does on the bike, his breath work and meditation, he journals. So it's common in practice that it's not something that's this fluffy thing. We now can back it up by the science. We know what the science is telling us. So, excuse me. So yeah, so it's implemented in a group level, and then individuals take and work with what they want to take and work with.
Yeah, I absolutely love that. I love that. And like I say, I do see it being done across a number of clubs now, probably in slightly different ways. But
Yeah.
I think it's so important. I feel like it's quite an untapped area, isn't it, for a lot of players as well. So it is the overall, obviously you've said there about the individuals and how each individual can take different parts of it, which obviously is the whole idea, isn't it, about us supporting players. But is the overall emphasis from your perspective on sort of down regulating, teaching players to down regulate, and finding a strategy that works for them?
Yeah, so a lot of clubs I feel like do probably yoga, because they see it as an S&C recovery strategy. And I feel like really yoga is used as a muscular thing or something that recovery, but actually if you look at from a lens of a restorative practice, in a sense of understanding body and brain, it's really good for movement, understanding how you feel, and the use of breath is so key in yoga. So we frame it slightly differently, but yeah, it's all around for me making that soil as strong as we can. And yoga, mindfulness, meditation, breath work, visualization, journaling is all around making that soil as much as we can. For demands of the game and demands of life, because we know the transition periods, we know the stats, we know what happens when players finish the game. So it's very much around how can we down regulate, but how can then we also up regulate? How do we understand how we feel in our body and our brain? And then how can we practice that? But also, what are we doing every day to really extend that window of tolerance? So every day that we are putting a little pocket into that soil, we're developing their window of tolerance, which means the fact that They can deal with the setbacks. They can deal with pressure in games. They can deal with moments of transition. They can deal with deselection injuries, but also then they can deal with stuff outside of life. But also then a bigger decision-making capacity. So we know that bodily state will affect decision-making. So the more that we can have bigger window of tolerance, which gives them more before they have to tip into fight, flight, or freeze, the bigger decision-making, the bigger scanning area. We know that once a player tips into fight, flight, or freeze, their scanning becomes very limited because of their movement in their face, their eyes and their muscles around the face becomes limited. So they're just surviving in that moment. So yeah, people perceive it that it's a restorative or a yoga practices there for stretch and recovery, but it's so much more if you look at it from a neuroscience lens.
I love that. I love the fact that you mentioned as well, it's not just about football and performance, because them carrying that on, hopefully when they have long careers and they retire, like you're still going to be able to carry a lot of those skills over to that time, aren't you? When they're having kids and all the other challenges that come after it, like there's so much to learn and take forward.
Yeah, definitely, especially breath work. So like, it's because I've been doing my PhDs, some of the data in my head, but our academy manager will talk about his son. His son plays, he's young, plays for a local team and in our pre-academy, but he don't like his maths. And he used to get him on his maths when he used to come home on his maths and like, just get your maths done, then you're done. But now he's like, right, we have some breath work, then we go into his maths, and then we take a little breath work, then we come back. He's like, it's the element of how they take it into. So quite a lot of our boys are obviously learning to drive. So one of them said to me the other week, he's like, I have to tell my driving instructor when I need to take my breath work, like take a rest and do a breath work. I said, how's that gone down? She's like, oh yeah, she's brilliant about it. She's I pull over, so you have to step out the car, I just need to do my breath work, and then she gets back in the car.
That's so good.
I know. So a lot of them do use the breath work. Other days, one of the boys went, I remember an argument with his other half. He says, and I says to her, I just need to go do my breath work and I'll come back.
Yeah. But they're real life situations, aren't they, where it's needed? And I think there's a whole generation of people that have not learned how to do that.
Yeah.
Which is why we see so much like struggling people as well.
Yeah.
So yeah, no, I think that's so vital and crucial and such powerful skills that they're learning.
Yeah, definitely. And I think, like I said before, they really enjoy it.
Yeah.
Like the boys love it. The little ones do. The little ones will say to me, "Are we doing yoga today? Like, are we doing some yoga?" And I'm like, "No, not today." Or whatever. Like they love it. And it's embedded, and we have a colouring in wall. And somebody said to me, "How'd you get this boys to colour?" I was like, "Because they come in, they just sit and colour in, like they just sit and colour." And quite a few of our boys have colouring books. They take them, they do it. But because we know that the science, and you can give the science behind it, which we know helps performance and aids performance, they do it. If I were just to ask them to just start colouring in, they'd be like, "What are you asking me to do that for?" But we've took some of our boys singing lessons, we've took some ballet classes. But if you frame it for them in the sense of this is what's going to help you, this is, and we've got a model at Sheffield about red zone and green zone, and they know about chemical responses and what we think and feel and how this affects, which basically is just what confidence is. I can give them the science behind why we're doing what we're doing, and the boys will go, all right, yeah, I'll give it a go. And they do when it's I have to admit they've been brilliant with it. They've bought into it.
Class. No, it sounds so good. Sally, I'm wary of the time. I don't want to keep you all day. But I want to just ask you to leave us with one sort of takeaway, one message for all the coaches, the practitioners listening. I said to you before, they're going to be working with a number of different groups of players. But with a lot of the things we've spoke about, there's obviously a hell of a lot of messages in there. But if you were to pick one in terms of us just increasing the level of support that we're giving to players across numerous ages, what would be one message you give to coaches, going forward?
Can I go a little bit off piece?
Of course, of course.
The one message I would say, well, it's three messages in one, but basically is around the before stuff. So even in the S&C in the gym, you've got to activate what's called ventral vagal and play state. If we're activated that, our learning capacity is higher and our regulation and our social connections higher. So what we do before we start our session is really important. So that's probably my key message. The fact of we talk around how you greet them. So use of names, fist bump. We know that bodily contact is dopamine release. So how you greet them, how you use them music maybe as they walk in the gym, how we use an arrival activity. So it's easier on the field because we can just do a little like soccer, tennis, or a fun activity. They're coming in the gym, is the puzzle on the wall, is there something on the TV? So something to start the activation of the learning. And then it's around then what we're doing today. So structure on a whiteboard. So if they walk in, anxiety will say when people come in and players will come in, what we're doing today, are we playing at weekend, what we're doing. When they're asking what they're doing, it's a sign of anxiety in a sense of the need to know. So if we just go, concentrate and I'll tell you in 5 minutes, they can't concentrate. So what I would say is how you frame before you start your sessions really important. So how you greet them, use the structure boards, writing it down, and then arrival activity. And you've got to be creative with that, especially in the gym more. And then it's just an activity to activate what we need to do in our nervous system. Because we talk around all the time around, you've got to connect before you correct. And also understanding that your physiological bodily state is going to depend on the quality of then what you get out in that session. So that little bit of how you build that in with music, with how you are, with your face, with your tone, is key for what you're going to get out in your session. Simple as that. So that's my main message, I would say.
Amazing. Sally, that was superb. There's so much to get people thinking about in that episode. I really, really appreciate you going through that. And I also realize there's a lot more we could have probably covered in that as well, but it just gives a bit of an insight into the work I know you and the staff at the club are doing, which is, it sounds absolutely amazing. So yeah, thank you very much for coming on and sharing it.
No, thanks for having me, Ben. Appreciate it.
So just leave us. If people want to keep up to date with the work that you've got going on, where would you direct them?
I'm not really active in stuff like that. I've got obviously Twitter and my LinkedIn. But moving forward, I'm going to try and pull, obviously, once the PhD is done and submitted and sorted, then I will look at probably trying to write a book or doing a few little bits. So yeah, so in the meantime, just connect with me on either LinkedIn or on Twitter, and then keep your eyes peeled for the next probably stage. This work is new. So at the minute it's kind of right, submit the PhD, get that signed off. The fact that then it's the work is doing what it says it does, and then we'll look at then how we then start to then get the messages out there a little bit better.
Amazing. Thank you, Sally.
No worries. Thank you.